Can you hear me? Is this good? Hi, my name's Greg Eiselein. I'm a professor in the Department of English and the director of K-State First, our university's first-year experience program. And we're going to talk to you today about how to engage and support our first-generation students. And I'm going to let my co-presenters introduce themselves, and then we'll get started.
Hi, I'm Kiley Moody. I'm Managing Director of Scholar Services in the Academic Achievement Center.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebeca Paz, and I serve as Assistant Director for the Office of First Generation Students, and we welcome you and thank you for coming. The slide, okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about who are first generation students. Basically, the definition of first generation students are those students who neither parent or guardian earned a 4-year degree. And let me go to the, so we have a magic person doing this. Okay, so then something to be aware of our first generation students is that they are resilient and they are hardworking. And then the other thing to know about K-State's demographics, that 27% of our undergraduate students are first generation. And before we go into the next slide, I want to ask how many of you are first generation or were first generation? That is awesome. Before you go, make sure you pick up some of the swag. And I really hope that you can help us with some of the interactions later on, because reflecting back into your first-gen experience. Some statistics to show you. We have national statistics as well as K-State statistics. And as you may know, that about 1/3 of students who enrolled at 4-year universities are first generation across the nation. The second part of the slide tells you the retention rates of our first generation students, and something to let you know that there is an achievement gap, not only at K-State, but across the nation between the completion rates and retention rates of first generation students and continuing generation students. For example, at K-State, retention rate into the sophomore year, there is a 6% achievement gap. Into the for 4-year degree attainment, there's 8.8% achievement gap. So you see that gap gets wider and wider as the semesters go. And for the 6-year retention graduation rate, we have an 11.4% gap. And what we want to do, we want to basically close that achievement gap. That's one of our goals. So far, we want to now get you and get everybody in a little bit of discussion. The question is, why do we want to focus on first generation students? Why does this matter? And I want to know and get some of your answers. Who would like to go first? Yes.
I think because part of focusing on like diversity and inclusion means actually walking the walk, as it were, when it comes to populations that might have been underserved otherwise. And I think first generation students is maybe one of those populations.
Yeah, and they are underrepresented, obviously, and they perform less, not because they're less capable, because they may have some barriers, and we'll talk about barriers later. What other ideas do you have? Why do we want to focus on this population of students?
Non-first generation students kind of know the ropes. They know maybe more of what to expect from college, whereas first generation students don't have anyone to look to ask questions about how does this work, what should I do, those kinds of things.
Okay, so we want to help them out. Thank you. Any other ideas? Why do we want to focus? Why is this the right thing to do? Why do we spend time and effort talking about it now? Any other ideas? How about our land grant mission? What's your idea?
Thank you. I thought those were both excellent answers. And I like those answers because they're student-centered, they're about the students and helping them, and I think that is the most important thing. But I guess I would like to add to that I think we need to focus on first-generation student success for the financial health of the university. We're losing too many students, and if we're going to continue to fulfill our mission, if we're going to continue to keep our enrollments up, we're going to have to do better with first-generation students. It's clearly a group that we're not doing as well with as we should be.
And also, thank you, Greg. And also, if you look at demographics, future demographics, those are the students that are going to probably be, there's more numbers growing in those populations. So we really want to go to those numbers, specifically in Kansas, the rural populations. How about our land grant mission? What do you think? Do you think that focusing on first-gen students is aligned with our land grant mission? So our mission is to serve the people, and these are the people of Kansas. The other thing that I think it's a great idea to focus on them, because these students enrich our campus, like you indicated right now, you know, they bring diversity, but they're also intrinsically motivated. They're pioneers. They're paving the way for their families. So if you want to have them in their classroom, you can count on them. They're going to be hardworking, responsible, and they're going to have that intrinsic motivation that can be contagious for others. And then they're also most likely to pay it forward, I think. Any other reasons why we should focus on them? Okay, I think I'm gonna let Greg go to the next slide now. And
Okay, our next section is about what are some of the barriers or the challenges that first generation students face to their student success. And we're gonna do this. Sarah's ready for this, and I'm so excited. But we want to do a think, pair, share. If you want to do your pair as a trio, you're welcome to do that. But for a moment, would you just take a second or two, and if you've got a writing instrument, go ahead and write down a few things. If you don't, just make a list or two in your head. What are some of the barriers or the challenges? And those are different things, but what are some of the barriers or challenges that first generation students face in being successful at K-State or any university? I'm going to give you a second to think through an answer, and then I'm going to group you up and have you talk with a partner. Okay, Luke, you need to find somebody. Okay, if you do have a couple ideas written down, you can continue to think and to write, but I'd like you to look around you, find a partner or two. If it's 4 of you, it's too big, divide into pairs, and just share your ideas with each other. Why do you think that first generation students sometimes have a struggle to be successful at K-State or another university? What are the barriers or the challenges they face?
That's what I was looking for. There's not. I'll go look in another classroom though. I'll be right back.
Okay, let's take 1 more minute, so get those ideas out there. Not on the board, though. Okay, so in the interest of time, I want to hear what you came up with. I thought I might come up here and just start and go down. I'm not going to force anybody to talk, but I would like to hear from as many pairs or groups as possible. Kiley Moody's going to write up some of the ideas as we go. But what do you think are some of the challenges that first gen students face? I'm going to start up here.
We talked about how, like, before students even get to college, like, they don't know what to look like or to look for when looking at colleges and comparing them. So I know, like for me, for example, when guidance counselors were asking, oh, what are you looking for? I'm like, I don't know, classes, I guess. Like, you don't know what it is that you need to look for.
And also just like the enrollment process, how do you apply for scholarships? What's FAFSA? Just a lot of those like logistical things that for some people it's really common sense, but not for others. So
First-gen students don't always know what to expect. Even if they're ready for the challenge of college, there are a lot of mundane things, the enrollment process, that they don't know how it works. And you probably know that when you don't know how something works, you might be a little bit anxious about it, even if it's simple, even if it's easy. If you don't know how it works, it can be stressful. Heather, did your group have something?
So I think the main barrier for first generation students is basically the money, economic barrier, because due to that they choose whatever their parents wants them to do, and that leads a lot of challenges when they enter into the colleges, because that they face that they are not feeling very confident to survive in the college, and they feel an anxiety, and there are a lot of problems comes in their lives.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yes, statistically speaking, not speaking about any individual student, but like as a large statistical group, first generation students are lower income. They also have a bigger gap between the costs of college and the expected family contribution. Those things often go together, but finances are a worry and concern, and with the rising cost of college, these concerns have only been exacerbated. Thank you very much. How about this down here?
We talked about the ways in which first generation students may not know what resources are available to them once they have arrived on campus. There are deans who will help you and things like this.
Thank you. That's terrific. Tucker or Don or K-State First people or?
Oh, sorry. We talked about even just the definition of first generation students, and if students are even aware that they are a first generation student and what that means to them and what extra support they can get on campus.
That's a wonderful point. I'm still flabbergasted by the irony of we use this term first generation college student. Most first generation college students don't know what it means, but we use it to categorize their experience here. It seems like it's part of the problem.
We talked about support systems. So their support system might not know the language of college, but they might also either like really want their student to be at college, and so, you know, really pressuring them to do that, or they might really do the opposite and, you know, encourage their student to come home because they need to work and help financially with the family.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mandy. Would you like to share something from your? Okay.
Well, I said we looked at the lack of first generation leadership and having those models on campus for students to look up to and to relate and to get information that way.
Excellent. I like that idea, that suggestion, because the solution's embedded in it. We need to get more first generation students in leadership roles to be role models for our newer first gen college students. That's terrific.
Just speaking from experience as a first generation student, I think language in general, maybe not having it as your first language, being English, and then coming in and trying to, you know, overcome that barrier as well as, you know, trying to have that family support, but they're unable to explain or assist because of language, in addition to not only with that kind of terminology in all of these things, but just in general, just language can be really difficult when you're starting school. So
that's an excellent point. I mean, language considered generally, the jargon is a big deal. We use this funny, specific, non-intuitive language to talk about college and what we do. We get used to it. We are all used to it. Folks that have been through college can often translate for their kids, but if you don't have anybody in your family who's translating, it can be a huge problem. Rebecca's going to talk about that a little more, I hope.
So one of the things that we were talking about was both of us struggled with community development for a variety of reasons, but also just including the fact that we were commuting. And so even things that schools try to build in for community weren't as accessible to us. And adding on the fact that we weren't aware of resources, multiplying that.
Excellent. Thank you. That's awesome. Right over here.
My lovely teammate Taylor had a great suggestion, which was that first generation students just may not have a concept of the plethora of career options or academic paths or all of that that's available. And so, you know, all of this is overwhelming already, but then, you know, just needing that opened up to them.
I think that's a terrific point because a lot of folks coming to college, including especially first generation college student, they think of lawyers, doctors, engineers, some pretty well-known professions. Well, there's so many other jobs that they may not have heard of the title yet. And knowing that those opportunities exist and you don't have to have college figured out on day one, that you're going to be introduced to some things. Thank you, Taylor. It's a great and important one.
So I also feel that, and I see this with a lot of the students that I work with, they experience the imposter syndrome, and those feelings that they don't belong, that they are fake, you know, that everybody else knows how to do, but they don't. And also sometimes I feel like the students also have fixed mindset when it comes to learning. I just wanted to add those two.
Yes. Are you familiar with the concept of fixed mindset? Fixed mindset individuals are, this is from the research of a famous Stanford psychologist named Carol Dweck, and she did this research on a whole bunch of different folks, but there are folks with fixed mindsets, and they tend to think that people are born a certain way and that you have a knack for doing certain kinds of things, and that and some people are just good at math, and some people are just good at writing, and some people aren't. Contrast them with folks that are open mindset, what she calls open mindset. Open mindset people tend to think that, well, if I'm not good at math, I could probably get better if I tried, or I did bad this time, but if I practiced, I could probably get better. And they tend to think that people are successful because of the amount of effort and focused effort that they put into a project. And you probably know some fixed mindset and some open mindset people in your own lives, right? Can you think of some? Yeah. The importance of Dweck's research to university educators has been the overwhelming amount of proof that open mindset individuals do much better in college. That if somebody comes in and says, well, I'm just not good at math, well, they might have just prophesied themselves into never being able to pass math. And if you don't get through math, you're not going to get through a college degree. Also seems not to be the truth that we're probably not born with innate abilities to write or do math or a lot of the things you learn at college, but that it's through struggle and learning and effort. Thank you. That was a really important one. Other ideas? Hannah? Okay, terrific. Wow, we got a lot up there, and thank you for getting the mentioning fixed mindset and are you familiar with imposter syndrome too? Has anybody experienced imposter syndrome? Is anybody at this very moment experiencing imposter syndrome? Like, I do not belong here. How come? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Kiley.
So kind of now on the flip side of that, so that we kind of looked at and addressed some of the barriers and challenges that first generation students may face. We're going to now look at what can we do to engage and support first generation students. So a minute ago, we did one activity that you hopefully all thought was pretty engaging, where you think pair shared, and this time we're gonna open it up to anyone. So you can raise your hand and let us know kind of what you're thinking. And then we will also keep track of these too. Mackenzie, not to put you on the spot, but I saw, did you get a picture of all of those? Okay. Awesome.
And I'm going to rush with the microphone to whoever's going to talk, but.
So what ways? I'm particularly interested, not to put you all on the spot, but when you talked about building community, and especially with students who may commute or may who not be, traditional students, like I would love to hear more of your ideas of how we can really support and engage those first generation students.
Start here with Jackie and then go over to Dawn.
So I'm an instructor in the K-State First program, which just provides some context with the co-curricular activities that are part of K-State First. One way that I have really tried to support commuting and first generation students is being mindful of cost barriers of things and showing them that that here are ways that you can build community for free, and also that don't involve dorm activities and things like that. And that's really helped a lot.
Quickly, I want to add, I don't know if you knew, but we now have a space for first generation students in Hall 201. We have a lounge, so that will be a great place to start building community. So if you can let your students know when you talk to them.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Rebecca. This is Dawn.
I'll say two quick things. First is be clear with your expectations. And second, nurture your students using their own voice.
Could you expand a little bit on clear expectations?
Sure.
Or
So
might you have an
one of the things that I feel as a teacher is I'm never going to hold you responsible for something I didn't teach you. So make sure that you're clear with what you expect your students to know and what you expect them to do with that knowledge.
And then you said help students find their voice.
Yeah. So I think that getting students to understand I say this to my students all the time, the most important thing you have is your time, but the most powerful thing you have is your voice. Is letting students know that using their voice, advocating for their own educational needs, advocating their opinions, that's going to be an important life skill, and college is a place to start doing that. So give them a vehicle for doing so, validate them for doing so, help them do so more clearly and more powerfully. I don't think we do that enough.
Great, thank you.
Excellent, Dawn, thank you.
In my opinion, to engage first generation students, one of the important things is the counseling service at the college. So they will know when they enter in the college, at least they will know that where their interest and what are the options if they have chosen wrongly. And there is college could also provide what are the possible financial supports for them if they are really needed.
So thank you, Heather.
I've also tried to work, I need to get better at this, but trying to not assume that they know things. This kind of started first with non-traditional students, but this definitely applies to first generation. But like just walking them through simple things like Canvas, because everybody uses Canvas differently, and just walking them through how I use it specifically in class, why certain assignments are used in class, just explaining the basics in a class, not expecting them to just know that, especially if they're freshmen, sophomores.
I just want to comment briefly on a theme that Heather and Dawn are reiterating, and it sounds almost obvious that, like, well, of course, if you're a teacher, you explain clearly how to do the things that you do in the class, but the fact is, we don't always do that, and continuing generation students often have other sources of knowledge and support for figuring out, well, how does Canvas work? They're often coached by family members to ask other students, find out, or they ask their parents. First generation students, sometimes because of fixed mindset or imposter syndrome, just start to feel like, well, I don't know what the heck's going on in class. It must be because I'm stupid and I don't belong. I knew I didn't belong here. They're not at all. The teacher has failed to explain clearly what it is the students should be doing or how to use the resources of the tools, Canvas, for example. It sounds so obvious and so simple, but it is so necessary for first generation student support, is explain clearly what's going on in class.
And it makes a huge difference, because not only for first generation students, but you may very well also have continuing students that helps out a lot too. And that's one thing that we've really talked a lot about, and especially when talking about like why focus on first generation students, is because again, what's good for first generation students is good for all of our students. And so even though you may have used Canvas or something like it, still taking that time to really walk them through makes a huge difference. And then that levels the playing field for everyone. So that makes a big difference.
Two things that I've been trying to do more of. One, and this is very connected with the clear expectations. I teach expository writing, and I have tried to rid my commenting of jargon. because that doesn't help them. And then the other is associated with not realizing that, at least as a first-gen student, realizing that my professors actually wanted me to come to office hours and have that helpful relationship. So sometimes that looks like posting resources and tutorials about how to use track changes, but also just constantly reiterating, like, I want to help you with the little things as well. Yeah.
So great point. And so one thing, we all know what office hours are, correct? And when we put that on the syllabus, we kind of know what that expectation is. A colleague and I were at a conference, not this summer, but the summer before, and they were talking about syllabuses and statements and things. And somebody mentioned that instead of putting office hours on their syllabus, they used student hours. So what do you think would be a reason behind that shift? Exactly, exactly. So yes, office hours to a lot of first generation students that they had gotten feedback from meant that as a professor, as an instructor, I'm in my office working away, working on my research, answering emails, like, do not bother me. So when they changed office hours instead to student hours, they had more students than ever before come to their office. And again, it goes back to that language, something, you know, so simple that we know what that is and what that means. But again, to a first generation student or other students, they may not really know what that means and how important that is to go to. So great points.
Excellent point. One of the, just to build on this theme, which I think is so important with student hours, one of the things we encourage in K-State First and so new students is requiring them to come to your office hours, make it an assignment, give them a small number of points perhaps, or make it part of their participation. But you don't make it optional whether they can come to your office or not. You get them into the office at least once to help teach them what student hours are about and how to make the most use of this kind of wonderful resource of college education, kind of the one-on-one time with the professor. Melissa?
Just to add on to that, I do the required office hours at the beginner, student hours. I love that idea. The other simple thing to do if you don't want to require it is to just send a sign-up sheet around your class with your availability. I did that today and told my students, it's not required, but I know you have a paper due Friday. If you have questions, sign up, and half of my students signed up.
Yep.
I don't think half of my students would have stopped by office hours or made an appointment, but when I passed it around and all they had to do was write down their name, they'll come.
Because again, oh, sorry, go ahead, Greg.
Well, I was probably going to say the same thing you were.
Probably. Go ahead.
You signal your availability. You make it easy for them to be there. You remind them that you really do want them to be there, and it's going to help them.
I add one more thing. We talked a little bit about, we alluded, I think, to the sense of belonging, and it also goes back to making students comfortable, and we just said, I think, and then going back to the imposter syndrome, because remember, the students may be feeling, I don't belong here. So when somebody says, come to my office hours, that means you're sending the message, you belong here. And I think that we always want to be reminded of that sense of belonging that we really need to promote among our students, because that's how they're going to start thinking, okay, I belong here. That means that imposter syndrome is going to be crossed off from their minds. Another good way of helping them battle that imposter syndrome is just basically saying you belong here. Right? You mentioned a little bit about the lingo that we use in higher education, which I think is a huge barrier that we have. We call it higher education jargon, and it's full of words like you mentioned, Greg, that we use every day, such as office hours or FAFSA and lots of acronyms, right? So something in that has proven to be, there's research that just completely overwhelms all students, and worse, first generation students, because the first generation students cannot call home and say, hey, mom and dad, what's the FAFSA, right? And then very comfortably, the mom and dad patiently are going to explain. So what we have developed, and this is linked to our webpage, we have a list of those jargon words, and I think we ran out of handouts. Some of you might have already picked it up. So with the intention to create awareness about those jargon words, so when we talk to students, we're able to maybe decipher for them, unpack it a little bit. What does that mean, and how does it relate in navigating the college experience? And also for them also to just have a quick a way of finding the meaning of it. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, and also realize that the jargon that we use can be a huge barrier in which we work with all students, not just first generation students, but mainly first gen students that can really build on that imposter syndrome.
Is it Melissa? Is that correct? So one other thing with the sending that sheet around, so I also teach a junior level leadership studies class, and we do one-on-ones in that class twice a semester. And that again is incredible because the students, one thing, we're meeting the students where they are. So then we kind of bring down that power differentiation or that intimidation level a lot of times, because then in those meetings, the students are like, oh, you're human, right? Like you put your pants on one leg at a time, like just like I do. And so a lot of times it's just little things like that that really make a huge difference, as Rebecca mentioned, in that sense of community and that sense of belonging.
And this is just one last really simple thing that I do, but I think modeling for my students the fact that I'm also a first gen student and letting them know, I think like you mentioned, I think it creates that sort of sense of humanity, but also I think letting, like having that humorous moment to say like, oh yeah, when I started college, I had no idea what this thing was. So let me tell you what it was. So that I think also it makes them feel better about asking questions because they know that I also struggled with those things.
Yep, that's great. And not only modeling maybe some of the challenges and things that you face, but thinking back to that clear expectations and some of those things too, or guiding them and not assuming that they know, are showing them examples of what you expect from their assignments or their papers or other things. Because I'm sure you all probably experience this. I work with a lot of students who the gap between high school to college for a lot of students is very large. And so helping them understand what those assignments look like, what are expectations from a group discussion, from participation, all of those kinds of things can again really help students know what does a successful student look like, and what are you expecting from my work ethic and the time and energy I'm putting into assignments.
One of the challenges that a number of you mentioned, or that I would put into a theme, is information, access to resources. You need to know about the counseling center. You need to know about financial aid resources. And the list goes on. You need to know the language. But we also know that the data dump, or the fire hose of information, here's all the information, spray all the first gen students with so much that they're just soaked, are not effective, right? Just saying it's all on the website, go, or faculty get so indignant at times, it's on the syllabus. And then you look at it, they got a 12-page syllabus, 10-point font, there's all this information, and it's not really reader friendly. What are some things that you all do, or that maybe Rebecca or Kiley have ideas about to help yes, access to information and resources is really key. How do you make it timely and effective rather than just a whole bunch of information out there? Brent's got an idea to get us started.
So I went to a conference workshop about like syllabi design, and something that I took away from that was framing your syllabus around questions that students might have. So as they look through, they can see like, I don't know what's expected of me. Well, there's a section that says what's expected of me as a student. So that kind of framework of it, I think, can help sometimes with questions that students can have and anticipating those.
A student-centered, a student-friendly syllabus, a document that they might actually want to read and that engages them, rather than something that looks like a contract or one of those end-user licensing agreements that no one ever reads, right? Thank you, Brent. Other ideas?
Providing online chat service. Online chat service, so whatever question I will have, I can type and find a valuable resource. Where can I find that?
So an online search resource?
Online chatting.
Online chatting, sorry.
This is one of the kind of technological resources that I think is great. Giving students the chance to ask questions anonymously. How do I find out? I'm not sure how much financial aid I'm getting, or I don't know where my class is. And having a chat service, be able to respond to them, give them information when they need it. It's less expensive than you think.
I also just think addressing the questions as they come up. If you've established a relationship with your students, then, you know, when they come in with crutches, you can say, hey, did you know that the Student Access Center provides rides for people who need it? And so it requires some back work to know your students well enough to be able to have that relationship, but to be the source of information as things come up.
That's a wonderful suggestion. I'm going to move to Rebecca.
That because I'm thinking if you have a class and you notice maybe that a lot of your students, there are certain questions that there's a theme, maybe even bring in somebody from student services that can talk about those resources because then they can get the information just in time. And I will also like to add, you know, just being friendly and just approachable. And approachable can be different ways, right? But yeah, just be friendly, smile, learn the students' names. I think it's so important, especially with foreign names. I think when we make an effort to pronounce somebody's name, even as difficult it can be, for me, it's very difficult to pronounce Asian names because my ears cannot hear those sounds. But just to make an effort, I think it makes a difference. Or so that because if I have to ask Brent every time, what's your name again? What's your name again? And figure out a way, especially when you have small classes and small size classes. I think it's really important. Also, for those students who are really, really shy, you could use things like we did earlier. We mentioned earlier the Think, Pair, Share. That's a great tool to have because that's going to engage that student that I'm sure has ideas, may have amazing ideas, but they're not going to have the opportunities to share their ideas if they are just totally overshadowed by the very talkative, outgoing students. So those are a few things.
So what about engaging students in class when you may have students who you may show up every day, but who you may not have participate or seem that engaged? What tips and tricks do you all use for working with students who may seem disengaged?
I teach sections of 80 students at a pop, and so we do a lot of group work, and I don't just let them pick their groups. I assign them groups and then we change them several times throughout the semester. So I think that helps with this in that they have to meet new people every time, and then they have their group that they sit with for a few weeks, and then they change it a couple of times. So just some different ways to get them going, and that they interact with the material, because for me to try to engage them all one-on-one is challenging.
Intentional group work, which also sets the expectation that every time you come to class, you're going to be engaged and doing something. It's going to help them. One of the best studies that I've seen recently about first-generation students suggests that they really do expect high degrees of participation and involvement. They think this is what college is going to be about. And so when we disappoint them with classes where they're not engaged, where they're just sitting and listening, they're disappointed.
I think one of the things is to give your students an opportunity to ask questions and then answer those questions. So on the first day of my class, I'll have all of my students write a question. And then in a general psychology class, I might have 200 people. On the second day, I answer all the questions. And for them to see their question show up in a PowerPoint slide and have the instructor take the time to actually treat their question seriously and answer it, I think it's kind of powerful. And then after that, they've been validated. They know that their questions are worthwhile, and they know that the professor is going to take them seriously. So I think this goes back to that nurturing their voice. Give them those opportunities and then validate when you can.
Thank you.
I just utilize a lot of the in-class anonymous polling kind of options, and I'll put up some kind of extreme statement to see how the class feels about a specific thing, and then group students based on how they anonymously responded. Like I'll circle like, if you said A, then this is like your mindset or like something you might want to go back and think about. And I also put up lots of questions that might point out to our non-first gen students or non-English speaking as your first language students, just to help those students that aren't those things realize my neighbor may be struggling. And I feel like that kind of creates a sense of community in the classroom, as well as just getting concepts learned.
Excellent, thank you.
One thing for me as a first gen student, I had to go through the military first in order for me to pay for college. So I acquired some things that are stuck with me along the way, physically and mentally. And there's a lot of students that have goes military service and acquire some type of chronic condition or disability that leaves them along the way. And a common thing with that is not an engagement in class because that they don't choose to, just because that they're going through different processes than others. So one thing that I really enjoy, because I personally will get distracted by a pain or a sensation randomly, is when I really appreciate when an instructor will take a moment to just pause for a second and then reprocess everything that's been gone through. So I'm like, okay, now I understand why we actually went through this, because a lot of times I've been through plenty of classes where it's just the PowerPoints and I have no idea why I even bothered with it, just to process, just to memorize information. So I know I'll use it later, but it just, at that time, it wasn't great. So being able to go back and just reprocess everything again has been very helpful.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think that's such an important point. This is another example of what, Kiley says. This is a teaching technique that is good for all students. I think it's especially important for first-generation students, especially if they're struggling with imposter syndrome. You just had this confusing PowerPoint and you're not sure how to hierarchize or what were the main points or what do I really need to remember. And so having a professor pause, go back and here are the key points, helps everyone. It helps everyone, but it particularly helps first-gen students who might be doubting themselves in their own learning.
Oh, I think there's one more.
I think the last thing is utilizing multiple modes of communication and opening up the door for multiple forms of communication so that we're not relying on the idea of cold calling in class or group work or things like that, utilizing like maybe writing things down and turning them in, or like in my class, we have a group me. So like they can DM me on the group me if they have questions. And so nobody is forced to communicate in one certain way.
Excellent, Jackie. We still have a lot of time, but I want to get to a few more points. And one that I really wanted to make was, this seems obvious, but it's connected to exactly to what Jackie said, so I'm going to jump in now if it's okay, is to include and involve first-generation students. I'm going to make a confession here, which is that I spent most of my college career thinking that some people were shy and that some people were just extroverted and outgoing. And when we were doing the large group thing, which I like to do, if some people wanted to participate, that was great because that was just their personality. And some people were just listening attentively. I don't think that's true at all. And I think it's particularly difficult, not for introverts, but for first-generation students. And let me explain. If we truly believe that being involved and engaged in the conversation, being part of the discussion, contributes to learning, well, anyone who's not contributing isn't learning as well as those who are engaged and involved. So if we need to do things to be intentional about how students communicate, whether it's giving them a few minutes to think through what their answer might be, or finding other modes where they can communicate, that seems very, very important. But just deciding, well, some students are just going to sit there. Maybe they're not prepared or maybe they're just not interested. That's not fair. And first-generation students will be harmed more by that false opportunity to participate, which they're not taking advantage of. I think we need to find structured ways to include and involve everyone in the class and not just make it optional. Sorry, that's me on my soapbox. That's the include and involve, I think, is one of the key things you need to do to support and engage first-generation students, and be intentional about it, not just leave it to random.
I may add one more thing about the expectations. We talk about being clear, having clear expectations, but also have high expectations because they may not be engaging or because they may be experiencing imposter syndrome does not mean that they cannot meet your expectations. So please have high expectations of them because they will rise to the occasion and they will do well. So do we want to go to the next slide now? Are we ready for, or do we have any questions? Kylie.
Are there other things that you want to talk about in terms of how to engage or involve first generation in class?
I think there's two. Okay. And there's, oh, go ahead,
I just
Kathy.
want to mention that also allow students to provide an opportunity to give the false answer than the expecting correct answer.
To allow an opportunity for students to give an answer, even though sometimes it may not be the correct answer, not pointing that out, but helping them
And
along.
validate that, you know, that answer. It may be a different perspective, right? And then yes, that's a good point, because that also you want to validate that they belong here, and that's listening to them, and is one way of validating. Melissa?
This is something I've stolen from my husband, who teaches mechanical engineering courses, but he has hundreds of students and he gives them all his phone number and tells them they can text him. And so I thought, if he can do that with hundreds, I have 44. So on the first day of class, I had all of my students text me their first and last name. So I had their name in my phone, and I have students will text me, and they long before they'll email me. And it hasn't been a problem. It's been great. It's a good accessibility thing. And they'll ask a very simple question, and they'll often say, "I'm so sorry to bother you." And I'll write back and say, "You're not bothering me, it's fine." And so that really opens it up to the students and probably ends up saving me time in the end.
That goes back to being approachable and accessible, however that works for you, right? So for you, may want to give them a text that somebody else may say, "Come to my student hours," however that looks for you, however that fits your particular class and your discipline as well. For others, it may be as simple as having this in your office. This says, if you're a first-gen college grad, if you have it there, or even in your syllabus or in your signature email, that tells the student, "I am a first-gen student, I can relate to you." Or we also have this other one here, I'm advertising now, sorry. But if you are a first-gen ally, if you were not a first-gen student while you were in college, you may become an ally, and we also have something for you to do. So because that maybe that shy student that is hesitant to talk, to ask questions, this may be the clue, oh, they care about me. And that may just give them that encouragement to talk and to approach you. And also to get the message that you are approachable and that you care.
Yeah, I do want to just add, is there anything else? Like, what have we forgotten to talk about? Like, what seems important to you in terms of ways to engage or support first-generation students? We talked a lot about, we have a little handout that we're going to share online afterwards. It's the, we've got them right here. Best practices with teaching first-generation college students. We've hit a lot of them. The importance of community and relationships, the importance of clarity, instructions, engaging, involving, using best practices, which are good for all students. But is there anything else that you think like, oh, that's really important, we should have talked more about that? Or anything you want to share, Dawn or Kylie? Or Melissa's got one more for us.
I think just sharing your own mistakes with students so that they see you as human, but also they know, here's all the mistakes I've made or I'm currently making, and it's okay. Everything's still going to be fine. So that when college is hard or life is hard, they know that it's hard in different ways for different people, but it's okay for that it's hard and they can still do it.
Exactly, because that goes back a lot to a lot of times that growth mindset of knowing that we've all stepped in it, right? We're going to step in it again, more than likely, but that we're still here and that's okay. And that there are people who can help walk alongside you during those times.
I want to just add, I mean, Dawn and a few others of you echoed this same theme, which is to be authentic, be real, be accessible. Don't try to hide your true self from them. Part of the reason this is really important that might not be obvious is it motivates students. If they feel connected to you as a real person, they're going to be willing to do things for you in your class and the learning that you're expecting them to do for the class that they would not do for a teacher they don't feel any connection to, that just seems like somebody up there talking and demanding and giving out grades. And so this personal, like, show your real self, be authentic, is a powerful motivation. And for those of you who are like, whoa, I'm not giving my cell phone number out to a bunch of students, or I'm not telling students about the time I did that crazy, you don't have to share all of that. You can share with them things that make you human, that show that, you know, sometimes you fail too, without TMI, right? You don't have to give them too much information. You don't have to overshare. You don't have to share things you don't want to share, but you should do something to let them know that you're a human being with real interests, a lot like them. Give them something to connect to. And likewise with the information, I'm with Melissa. I think having students be able to text you whenever can often solve a lot of problems quickly. But if you're like, no, my phone, I don't want that. That's okay. Let students know how they can get a hold of you quickly and easily. What's the best way to communicate with me?
It could be as simple as email. Go back to old emails. Yeah. Any other questions? So what I wanted to say to wrap up, you probably have noticed that, or you might have heard that November 8th has been designated National First Generation Student Celebration. This means that colleges across the nation are celebrating their first-gen students. So K-State has been celebrating since the beginning. This is our third year in a row. And this year we scaled up our celebration. We have a whole week celebration, and actually this is the first event that we're having to kick off our national celebration. So we also have, so I wanted to tell you a few things that are happening. One of them that if you have the time, I would encourage you to go. If you want to learn a little bit more and unpack about the imposter syndrome, that is very real, not only with students, but also as students graduate. So we have a webinar on Thursday from 1 to 2 p.m. and the information is right there. There is also going to be a part of KSU Night. We're having an immigration panel, and we're going to hear from students' stories. And we're also going to talk not only about their immigration experience, but also because a lot of them or most of them are also first-generation students. We're going to talk a little bit about first-generation too. And then on Friday, we have a #1 party. If you want to come to the Union from 11 to 1 p.m., we're going to have lots of fun stuff, and we hope to have students, faculty, staff going back. We're trying to build community, the pride of what it means to be first gen, and I think we've all heard it. You know, the story is our students are pioneers, they're resilient, they're strong, and also as you work with them in your classrooms, remember their strengths, because they bring a lot of strengths, and capitalize on those strengths. Use those strengths to your advantage. And, you know, that resilience and that enthusiasm, that positivity can be contagious for the rest of your students as well. So I just want to hope that you join us for some of our celebration. If you want to get more information, we have a few stickers here. If you want to pick some up for your colleagues, please feel free to do so. And so we thank you for coming. Thank you for your time, and go First Gen.
Okay, as we start to finish up, I just want to remind everybody that if you're looking to get professional development certificate credit for this, please do the post-event survey. And if you haven't logged into our TLC Canvas webpage, all of the events that we've done this year are cataloged on that page, so you can watch them at your leisure. The event that you attended today is actually not only part of our professional development series, but it was actually earmarked as a need-to-know event. We thought it was that important, and I'm so thrilled that Greg and Kiley and Rebecca spent their time today. So please join me in thanking them one more time. And if you haven't signed in, please do so on your way out. But thank you all for coming.